wanted to hear or see me speak and on this subject. So this is being recorded for her, and also Jackie Carter mentioned that she was running off with the first-year residents today, but she'd like to watch this later. So, and honestly, it might be a real treat for me to have this to watch at some point, because I've never seen myself teach either. Now, that being said, this is a little bit different than what I've usually done teaching. And I have to thank Shelby, who came up with this idea that he had an open date at noon on the 23rd and asked if I would like to reflect. And I'm not sure he used that word, but I chose that word. Actually, he told me I could talk about anything I wanted to, but reflection is really important to me. I think it's an important learning tool. And by the way, those who don't know, reflection rounds that we started doing during the morning report started years and years ago, and it was an idea that we have continued to some extent. It's changed a little bit, but it's still pretty much the same as how we started it. So it's going to be, I've had a real interesting time in the last month thinking about my years as a family doctor. Now you can't do a lecture without having some goals. So it's first of all, it's going to be my reflection. By the way, one of the things which some of you may remember is my favorite question when I interviewed prospective candidates to our residency. I asked them to tell me their personal biography. And it's interesting to see how they constructed it and what came to their mind spontaneously and what they said to me and how they composed themselves. But I just love the stories. So today is going to be a lot of stories. I hope it might inspire some of you out there, whether residents or faculty. May not, but this is going to be a summary of some of my inspirations, some of my heroes, and some of them you know. I also hope to challenge, particularly the faculty, but honestly I think there's not a big difference between faculty family physicians and practicing family physicians. I think we all need to reach higher. We all need to aim higher, and I've had the opportunity to work with people who have reached higher and aimed higher, and I'll show you how that happened to me. I also want to reassure us, everybody here, that if you enjoy helping people get healthier, you feel that's a powerful, important thing, you're in the right place. You're in the right spot, the right time. I think that the winner here of this talk is our discipline, family medicine. One more disclaimer, I don't like lectures. I learned not to lecture, and I don't like PowerPoint. So in my final lecture, I'm doing a lecture at a PowerPoint. But I can't think of any other way to reflect. And I want to welcome my family here, my loving wife, Marty, my two daughters, Nicole and Natalie, and you better not make me cry. If I was given a talk about my life, I'd start with my parents, particularly my father, but also my mother, who said, you need to get an education. My father started saying that when I was in the 3rd grade. And he admired a family doctor. And he had to drop out of school when he was in the 8th grade. It was the Great Depression, and he joined Franklin Roosevelt's Civilian Conservation Corps, and hence we became genetic Democrats. Sent the money home, worked hard, building roads in the Glacier National Park. But that's another story. The first hero I want to introduce you to is Dr. Richard Bucher. Dr. Richard Bucher became my family doctor in 1954 when he moved to the small town of Chester, Montana, a town of 900 people in a real desolate place in northern Montana. Richard, I can remember him tromping into our house when we all had the chicken pops. That's chicken pops. And when we were there were 5 of us, and within a 10-year period, my father and mother kept very active for about 10 years. And we all had them at different stages. And he came late at night because one of my sisters had a very high fever, and my parents were quite worried about her. And the admiration my parents showed to him sort of imprinted upon me at that moment. And Richard has become my lifelong friend. And Richard's a very unusual guy. He's now 90, and he's living in an assisted living facility, but I never once have not gone to visit with him when I go home and be intrigued with the immense knowledge and wisdom and love of the man. Tell you a little bit, he's a little bit quirky too, maybe perhaps like me. But I'll tell you a brief story. Richard grew up in Burma. Now you guys know it's Myanmar. His parents were missionaries, missionary physicians. He went to Woodstock School in India with our first director of internal medicine, Cecil Honor. I reintroduced themselves to each other after Cecil joined our faculty and found out that I knew about Woodstock School, and I knew somebody who went there, and lo and behold, he went there at the same time as Richard Bucher. They were childhood friends. But Richard was brilliant, of course. I got into Yale Medical School, forbid me, at a young age, and was a missionary's kid. He was poor, and he was trying to live on very little and work hard and go to medical school at the same time. One of the jobs he had was taking care of the monkeys in the experimental labs. He fed them and took care of them, and every now and then a monkey would die. And Richard, being a very frugal person, which I imprinted, knew that a monkey was meat, and he was short on meat, short on cash, but he also knew they were experimenting with TB. But he had access to an autoclave at night, so he autoclaved the monkey. He didn't have time to skin him. He said the only thing about the monkey meat was that terrible burned hair taste in the monkeys. I could go on with stories about Richard, and on and on and on. But that's the kind of guy he was. He inspired me. I got to college, I made it into medical school, and I had no doubt I was going into family medicine, even though my professor of surgery tried very, very hard to talk me out of it. He said, "You're a good student. You don't want to be a lowly family doctor." And I said, "Well, I'm going to a small town." He says, "Well, then be at least an internist. Step up the ladder a little bit." Fortunately, he didn't dissuade me. When I got into residency, I was at the University of Missouri Columbia, and it was definitely easy to look down upon the family doctors. But we rotated with the internists, and I was a very competitive person. Became an avid reader of the New England Journal of Medicine, and I could spout out the latest studies as well as anybody. And, you know, but always for medicine grand rounds, they brought in some heavy hitter like Robert Petersdorf, who wrote about fever of unknown origin, or Howard Spiro, the famous gastroenterologist. A lot of famous, they were all famous internists, big time persons. And one day they advertised that Medicine Grand Rounds was going to be a guy named by the name of Curtis Hames, who was a general practitioner from Evans County, Georgia. And Curtis came in, and I thought, oh my gosh, you know, look at it. Got a wave from Elvis era, you know. This is in the early 1970s. Oh, he's kind of been bare. It's kind of an old coat with the, you know, those elbow patches that have been in and out several times, but at that time they were out, and he was wearing them. Then he went up there and started drawing like a guy from Georgia, and then he started telling us a little bit about what he did. And I just, long story short, is Curtis actually discovered the association of HDL cholesterol with heart disease. He discovered what was called for years the Australia-associated antigen of hepatitis B, which is now called hepatitis B surface antigen. The guy was an incredible genius, and we walked out of that lecture, us family practice residents, holding our heads high. We had a family doctor in Claxton County, Georgia, that they dedicated an entire issue of the archives of internal medicine to Curtis's papers. He had a basement full of blood that he had sampled. He chased medical students all over the country to follow up on some of his epidemiologic studies. He was a true genius, and I realized, you know, you didn't have to just be a podunk person to be a family doctor. You could be a little bit on the academic side. Next among my heroes came Paul Frame. I almost forgot his name. Paul Frame wrote a series of articles when I was in practice in my early days in Aurora, Missouri, and that's what I was always going to do, practice in a small town, deliver babies, and my goal was to deliver the babies of the babies that I delivered. And I thought if I did that, it would be a successful career. But while I was in the small town, I started reading the Journal of Family Practice in addition to the New England Journal of Medicine, and somebody wrote a critical review of adult health maintenance prevention of atherosclerotic diseases. And when I started reading this critical review, it occurred to me that somebody was on a different level than I was. By the way, I still have the original papers that I cut out of my journal of practice, family practice, with an X-Acto knife, and coded them and stored them. And you've all seen that my file cabinet has about 10 stacks of papers on top of it. So I was quite an active reader of the journals. But who was this Paul Frame guy? And he began to make me think, you know, at that time, a lot of family doctors would put somebody in the hospital for 3 days and run a battery of tests on them. It was called an executive physical. Can you imagine running a person in the hospital for 3 days and doing a barium enema and doing a bunch of blood tests and EKGs and all that sort of thing? Paul started examining the critical value of prevention and started looking at what pays off, what actually makes people healthier, and what actually costs, and what actually makes them less healthy, and came up with a series of principles which I've taught all of you at some point. 6 principles about preventive services that you should all remind yourself. I later discovered at a STFM meeting that Paul Frame was my age. He just retired last year after a long practice in Cohocton, New York. And I met Curtis Hames at STFM meetings later. Now they give out a research award for Curtis, and Paul won that one year. As I continue to read and study, this is one person that has really driven me throughout family medicine. And you can see family medicine does things in economical ways. This is called The Intellectual Basis of Family Practice. It was written by this guy, G. Dale Stevens, who Logan knows his nephew, who practices in Kansas. And what was different about this book? At the time, family doctors were thought to be a little bit of a pediatrician, a little bit of internist, a little bit of surgeon, a little bit of obstetrician, a little bit of this. And they didn't have a separate discipline. When Gale, who also practiced in Wichita and started one of the first family medicine residencies in Wichita, sat down to write, Gale wrote about determinants of health in a different way. He wrote about anthropology and theology and philosophy and sociology and all kinds of other things that are involved in determining health. At the time, I was in practice in Aurora, Missouri, and I recognized that just, finding diseases and eradicating them or thinking you eradicated them and treating them wasn't enough, that there were too many more determinants of health. And I needed to learn more, and Gale really gave me that option to understand that family medicine isn't just a derivative specialty. Family medicine has a body of knowledge that's all our own. So now we'll go to some of the latter-day heroes. This is Peter Moberg. I know that Tim remembers Peter Moberg. Sherry remembers Peter Moberg. Kyle. So there's a few old-timers in this room along with me. And Peter is another interesting fellow. He's the only guy that I know of, probably, likely, the only guy that grew up in Bottineau, North Dakota, and attended the Bottineau School of Forestry and then transferred to Harvard. I think he's probably the only one. I'm not sure. Haven't really checked it out. But at Harvard, he lived in a dorm with Tommy Lee Jones and Al Gore. They were all in the same dorm. Peter then went to Guyana. That was a big thing for us children of the 60s to become Peace Corps volunteers, where he fell in love with a woman who was of a different faith. Peter was a good Lutheran. She was a good Islamic. And so, but Peter, love conquers all. So he got married in a turban in Arabic. And then he came back to the United States, went to medical school at Stanford. After Stanford, he came to the same residency I was in with the University of Missouri Columbia. And we became good friends. He went on and did a few other things before I lured him back here as the first full-time faculty person I recruited after we started the residency program in 1987. So Peter was here off and on. He's kind of a citizen of the world. He's done a lot of different things along the way. But the one thing I wanted to point out about Peter is Peter said that if you really want to be a residency program, you got to do research. And I explained to Peter that we don't have to do research. We are not the place to do research. Research is done in academic centers where they have great infrastructure and funding and grants and all this sort of thing. We just take care of patients. We don't do research, we read research. We consume research, and then we apply research. Peter never won that argument right away. About that time came one that I don't know very well, but his name is David Sackett. And David Sackett, for those who are familiar with the term evidence-based medicine, was one of a group of people that came up with the idea of evidence-based medicine. And I thought, how stupid is that? It's all evidence-based. Until I started to learn a little bit, read his book, and decipher some of these studies that I was consuming and applying to my patient, wondering why they didn't work very well. I'll tell you one little story here. One of them I remember was how to take off a tick. Well, I'll tell you, every farmer in the Ozarks knows how to take off a tick. But when I read the textbooks, it was sort of like, you know, use a match to heat it up, and I burned some people doing that. Or, you know, grab it with the tweezers so you don't break it, and every time I grabbed it with the tweezers, I broke it. And, or soak them in mineral oil, which makes them too damn slip to pull off afterwards. None of these things worked, but they were written by the academics. And so, you know, when my neighbor told me how to grab it and pull in the same direction as the long axis of the body gently, get the whole tick out and throw it away and wash your hands off. You know, if you haven't broken the blood sac like you do all the time with the tweezers, you're really at no risk. So anyway, that's what I noticed when I was in practice, is a lot of things are being done because somebody said it's a good idea, and somebody that's got a big reputation or a big name or something like that writes it down, and we all say, oh, that's good, that's good, that's good, that's good. And it's really not true when you start reading the literature, and Sackett is the one that really opened my eyes to this. But it's very hard to read all that literature and consume all that literature, decipher all that literature, and know all of the scientific principles to know whether it's true or false. And along came someone with unique skills by the name of Brian Alpert. Anybody know Brian? A couple know Brian? This is nothing personal, but Brian probably has some kind of a psychological illness. But he took all of his notes from medical school and put them into a database and started a company called Dynamed. And Brian is one of these guys that can read medical literature and understand medical literature, and he can consume enormous amounts of medical literature, and he updated Dynamed every day. And he put it out there, and he graded the evidence, and he did all of this by himself. He recruited me as a writer fairly early on, so I served on his editorial board for a number of years, and I learned a lot about deciphering medical evidence. Now he's sold out to EBSCO, which is a big company in Massachusetts, which continues to promote Dynamed, and some of you will know that I promoted Dynamed, still promote Dynamed for years and years and years as a way of trying to keep up with the literature in a digested, concise, and evidence-based way. So Brian really made a difference in my life. He probably wasn't as talented as a doctor as he is in reading and writing and digesting and giving nice brief summaries that people like me can understand. And you know, you have to always look at motives. Brian just loves to do this. You know, he isn't like working for somebody who's trying to promote a product. He's trying to promote truth. And that's why there's some things about it that aren't as good, and I know some of the residents don't like it at all, but when you want to find out what the best evidence is, it's still a valuable place to go with Dynamic Medical. Some of you may recognize this guy. This guy's another hero of mine. He was the director of internal medicine in our residency program, which some of you may not know. He and his twin brother were both outstanding internists and very brilliant, very good. But what I put John's picture up here for, John, as you now know, might know, is administrator at Cox South. He changed, went back to school, got a hospital administration degree, and came back to Cox South as an administrator. John was one of these guys with foresight that did things before they were popular. And in 1995, he really strong-armed an electronic medical record. And John doesn't do everything right more than the rest of us do. But he did this really pretty much on his own volition, his own power. Tim was a senior resident when we got centricity, which would have been called logician, which Kyle's class put a play on about logician, but that's another story. Anyway, John recognized that we needed to collect data. And before the electronic medical record, if somebody asked me to do quality assurance, they'd ask me how many diabetics I'd have, and I'd say, well, I don't know, 20, 30, maybe 40. How are they doing? Oh, pretty good. Why don't you pull about 10 of their charts and pull off this data on how they're doing and send it back to us, and we'll give you a quality report. And so I'd think about the 10 people I could think of, the last few that I'd seen, a couple that were doing terrible, a couple that were doing good, and I'd look at the charts and send it back, and they'd send me a little report back. Looks like you're doing pretty good. And electronic records change that. There's a lot of bad things about electronic records, but the good thing about electronic records is you can really look at your whole practice. Those of you who are on the quality committee or heard me pontificate about this before know we have 1,267 diabetics. And we know exactly when they had their last A1C and how many of them are above 9.0 and how many have blood pressures that are below 140/90, et cetera, et cetera. Now we can look at our whole practice and see, we're not doing very good in this area. We can target what we do in this area. That was all of that avenue opened up to us because of the advent of electronic medical records. I think everybody recognizes this guy. Laird's a unique guy, and you've just already celebrated Laird, and so I don't have to tell you a whole lot of things new about him, but I'll tell you this. When he walked into my office, we had hired an excellent obstetrician. He did a great job in this program. And by the way, that goes back to the fact because I couldn't get C-section privileges. I'd done over 100 C-sections in Aurora, but clearly I was inferior to the C-sections being done here, which was really another interesting story because the first year I didn't have any residents. And the OBs had locked all of the obstetrical patients out of their offices. There was no prenatal care given to 450 women per year in Springfield, Missouri, because they were objecting to the Medicaid payment rates. So, when we started the program, and by the way, I came here in part because I wanted to continue doing OB, and my partners, we'd been sued and had some setbacks, and they didn't want to keep doing OB, they wanted to stop doing OB, and when I was hired to come up here, we're in the midst of an OB crisis in Springfield, Missouri. 450 women delivering every year without any prenatal care. They were all drop-in deliveries. I became on the call box, and of course I was delivering a couple babies a night, and whenever I was on the call box, and of course periodically I'd have to do a C-section, but I had to call in a obstetrician to help me do the C-section. And I discovered what really fueled me in understanding that we could really teach family doctors to do C-sections was about half of them were worse than me. About maybe a third of them were worse than me. A third of them were about the same, and a third were better. But what did better mean? Better meant that they could do it a little quicker. But our outcomes were the same. Our patient-oriented outcomes were the same. We had the same fetal mortality rates, the same maternal morbidity rates, the same length of stays, the same rate of postpartum infections, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even the guys that are pretty slow. But the point of it is just like teaching any skill, you'll find some people that have natural ability and it'll be faster. And most people have average ability like me, it'd be about the same, and some people were slower, but still came out with good outcomes. So I discovered that you didn't need to do 300 C-sections to be qualified. You needed to do enough. And enough, I had far less numbers than they did, but I had just as many skills. But Laird came along when Gary Robinson decided to retire, and Gary Robinson was really important to us because he was a well-accepted obstetrician in our community. People liked him and believed in him, and when he joined our program, we suddenly got a little bit more respect from the nurses and the other doctors that were doing OB in Springfield. But he had decided to retire, and I thought, boy, we're never going to find an obstetrician that supports family medicine like Gary Robinson did. And into my office one day walks this guy. I knew him by name, and I'd even met him once, but I didn't really know what he was about, and he said, I want that job. And I said, really? And so, you know, I thought, well, sounds like he wants it, maybe I can pitch for a higher deal here. And I said, what makes you want this job? And he said, well, I want to be a teacher. I want to work in academic medicine. I don't want to move out of Springfield. And I said, well, what makes you think you can work with family doctors? And he said, family doctors are as good as we are, from an obstetrician in Springfield. And then I thought, well, maybe he's just saying that to get the job. And I said, what have you done to prepare yourself for the job? And he said, well, I got a master's in public health. Really? A master's in public health? How'd you get that? I drove to St. Louis every weekend for 2 years, took classes, studied in between the weeks, and got a master's in public health. And I thought, oh man, we got something here. And sure enough, when Laird came in, Laird set the bar higher. I was just trying to, you know, improve things slowly, you know, get a little bit better all the time. And Laird just said, no, we're going to be great. We're going to be excellent. We're going to be, and so he started writing papers. You know, the best paper about family doctors doing C-sections came out of this program, and lots of other things. What he did was he elevated my gaze. I thought, you know, we can do more, and he was really instrumental in thinking that way. So I'll go back to somebody now that you probably don't know. Anybody know this woman? This is Barbara Starfield, and Barbara Starfield was a pediatrician who worked at Johns Hopkins. She just died in her swimming pool about a year ago, maybe a little bit more. She was swimming laps and had a heart attack and died. But Barbara started looking again with an unbiased view of what are the determinants that improve health. And she wrote hundreds of papers, together with a research group that wrote hundreds of papers, continues to write papers, and they keep finding the same thing. And that is this, that the higher the percentage of family doctors, this one was general practitioners, but they did it with family doctors, they did it with all primary care people, they did it with the determinants of primary care, the 4 C's, doctors of first contact, continuity, comprehensiveness, and coordination. The more the people adhere to those characteristics, contact, continuity, comprehensiveness, coordination, the more they did those things, the better this got. The more people doing this in the community, the better the health. And the more people doing this in this community, the lower the spending. Now that graph may look a little bit uncertain to you, but I'll tell you that's a trend line. And this is a trend line done by thousands of similar studies in different payer groups, like this one I think is Medicare patients, in different countries, in different health systems, in different insurance, in different states. And it all comes out the same thing. The more primary care doctors you have, or especially if they follow the 4 C's, and the closer they follow the 4 C's, the better the results, meaning better health and lower costs. And you start thinking of what are the healthcare problems of this nation? I think most people would agree. It's costly and it doesn't work very well. We're number 37 in health. The last that we let the WHO look at the statistics because we didn't like being number 37, but we were number 37. But we were number 1 in spending by almost double the next closest country. So we got a problem, folks, and I think everybody knows it. What was important to me was, how can this be? I could think of things like, when I take the time to talk somebody out of an MRI that they don't need, and I spend a half hour doing it, I save somebody $1,000. But what did I get paid? Almost nothing. So if I help somebody reduce their healthcare costs and they get paid, obviously that would save money. How would it improve health? Well, honestly, if what I do predominantly is talk people out of having things done, it must be some of those things are bad for their health. And that might make them less healthy. It certainly don't make them more healthy. But I think it's more than that, and this is the next data point that made me really concentrate.
And this is important. This is from McGinnis. It was published in 2002. There's been similar studies, but I think this is a real important point. And this is the contributions to reduction of premature death. But it's been done in other ways. Morbidity, not just mortality, but morbidity. And what is the biggest factor that contributes to reduction of premature death? I think we all know it. We're family doctors. Behavior. We can improve this one. We have a 40% opportunity, even if it's partially effective, even if it's just loosely effective, if only 10% of our patients actually quit smoking, it has a huge impact. This one is medical care. So we're spending 17% of our gross national product here, and very little here, except for those of us who do a little beyond biomedicine, and that's mostly family medicine that does something beyond biomedicine. You find discover diseases and whack out tumors and out appendixes and that sort of thing. These other things we might influence in some ways: environment, social factors. There's not much we can do about genetics, but there might be some things, especially those of you who deliver babies. But those are the things that make a difference. And if your goal, my goal, was to help people get healthier, that's why I went into medicine. I thought, you know, health is such a gift, it's such a wonderful thing. If I can help people get healthier, I'm going to feel like I really did a good job. I lived a good life. Well, why am I going to concentrate all my time here when these other things are so much bigger? And I think that's what family doctors do. And I think what helps people change behaviors are things like relationship. So I had to start figuring out, how am I going to be better at helping people change behaviors? And along came a woman by the name of Jackie Carter. And here I'm going to tell you about my first big mistake. We went through, by the way, the founding fathers of family medicine and the Royal Fathers did something right. They said family doctors need behavioral health training, and you have to have a behavioralist on your faculty. So we started out with a licensed professional counselor. We had some guest talks by psychiatrists. Some programs have licensed social workers, some have ministers. Everybody has something different. But we eventually went through a few places and got to what we really want as a psychologist, somebody that can teach us how to do these things. And a woman, we opened up our, well, one pair that were working here left, and we opened up our faculty position to a psychologist. And I interviewed about 8 people. We interviewed 8 people. We never, I should never say I, because it was always a group effort in this program. But we interviewed about 8 people, and we told this one no. We got somebody better. But the other person didn't stay very long for some family reasons, and she came back and applied again, and I hired her. So I want to tell you that sometimes you don't make the right choice the first time. I think everybody knows what a difference she's made in this program, both in teaching us some skills in psychology, applying some skills in psychology, but also expanding our horizon on things like arts and humanities and how those things can make a difference in health outcomes. I don't know if I'm going too slow here. I don't think so. Well, another hero of mine, Gabe Curtis. And Gabe is a hero in ways that she doesn't know, and I'm also going to use her as a symbolic hero here. And tell about my second mistake. No, the first mistake was Peter Mulder telling him we didn't do research. And the second mistake was not hiring Jackie Carter when I had the first chance. The symbolic mistake, before I get to Gabe Curtis, the person, is Gabe Curtis, the representative, whether she likes it or not, of womanhood. It was really clear to me after we matched with our first class of residents, where we had 4 males, good, excellent physicians. But here's what we want to do. We want to deliver babies. We want to take care of families. We want to welcome children and pregnant women. And we're going to do this with an all-male group. So when we did our match list that year, we had 18 applicants our second year. It was way better than the 0 the first year. And I recruited them by knocking door to door, but that's another story. I'll go on with the second group. We had number 12 on our group rank list, and you all know the group rank list is sacrosanct, and it has been ever since. But number 12 was a person, a male. Number 11 was a male who happened to be a DO, and number 12 was a woman. I knew that we were going to get, or had pretty sure we were going to get one woman out of our first camp. And she went on to become a faculty member here, just left a couple of years ago, Mary Jo Fisher. But I thought, if she's the only woman, this isn't going to be stable. We need another woman. I was pretty sure number 12 would come if she got a chance. And I was pretty sure no other woman was going to rank or was going to match here. And I flipped it. I confess, a lot of guilt about that, a lot of wrongdoing about that, but we matched with 4 women and 2 men, and I think it started us on the road to being able to attract women. Family, you need to deliver babies, you want to feed children, and you need women. That's, I love to deliver babies, but you need at least some women, as you all know, for all the obvious biologic reasons. But Gabe didn't, that's her symbolic value here. Gabe became a really important tripod to Laird and I, who wanted to really increase and become a research culture. By then, it became clear to me that just reading research wasn't going to do it. Just reading Dynamed wasn't going to really do it. That getting at truth of scientific literature really takes a deeper understanding than any of us have until we do it ourselves. And I know, I plowed through a few studies, and you realize how you can adjust things to come out the way you want to, and it isn't always easily decipherable when you read the research. But when Gabe came, we had a triumvirate, somebody who had skills, but more than that, had diligence, dedication, hard working. The girl licks her calf. And we knew now that we had a critical mass that we could go ahead with research. The next person, another hero, again, sort of a symbolic hero, but not entirely, is when we came up with our first great paper. And this was a resident, and you all know Shelby. And Shelby, like a lot of residents, dithered back and forth with what he was going to do for research, and he started noticing an association, and he did a study showing that women who smoke require more pain medication postpartum. And it had a huge, a very small p-value. Women who smoke require more pain medicine postpartum. We'd already noticed, we already had a chronic pain problem, that most of our chronic pain patients smoke. This was the first time I saw it done outside of chronic pain, and realizing that, nicotine must do something to pain receptors. And I think it's a real important paper. By the way, he's struggled real hard to get it published. He's got it out there again. It's not been published yet. It needs to be published, because there's something, I think, by this study that's connecting. There's a connection between pain and smoking. And he wrote a great paper. He's working on getting it studied, and thank goodness he brought his charisma and talents. Certainly everybody knows that he's intelligent to our program and is able to promote research, but also grow himself. He's one of the leaders in our humanities curriculum. Important working with Jackie, and one thing that our program director Tim has talked to us is you need partners, you need pairs, at least triads, at least dyads, and hopefully triads, and sometimes quadrads to really get things done in family medicine. Next hero is me. And I'm just going to point out one thing that I did that I don't think, and this is the challenge of faculty persons, that I don't think all of us do enough. I've written 180 posts on a blog. Call letters are up there. I've had 91,633 page views. And when you write, it does a couple of things. Like Shelby's needs to be published. This is self-published blog. But when you write, you have to think through things better. You have to organize your thoughts better, and it's a really big step from doing research and thinking about how you take care of patients to actually writing it down and organizing it and getting it published. And even though it's self-published, it's had a powerful effect. I get some feedback from people all over the world that have read this thing. So I would encourage you all to read it. That's a challenge. So let me summarize going forward. My challenge to you, particularly faculty members, but really everybody, is to develop yourself as scholars rather than craftspeople. Really honestly, when I came out of medical school and residency, I was a craftsperson. I read the manuals and applied them. And if you develop yourself as scholars, you got to first read a lot. And I did that. And then you got to research, and then you got to write. And if you do all three ends of that, then we continue to grow ourselves. There's better ways to help people get healthier, which we all sought to do. And broaden our horizons. It's not just medicine. It's not just electricity. It's not just surgery. It's not just radiation. Relationships count. Arts makes a difference in how we understand our fellow human beings. Empathy is developed sometimes out of arts. By the way, Jackie is with the ones at Crystal Bridges right now because we have a program where they can go to see great art and discuss how it makes them understand their human beings better. Because as St. Francis of Assisi wrote, and I will paraphrase, seek first to understand and then to be understood. And if we don't understand our fellow human beings, we're going to have a hard time helping them get healthier. And so many times we try to make ourselves understood, make ourselves clear to people rather than trying to understand them. Teamwork. I want to say a couple things about teamwork. First, this is Rhonda, another one of my heroes. Family doctors were described when I applied to medical school as World War II, World War I flying aces. They got in a plane by themselves and flew it. But sometime during the way, I realized that I had a lot of teammates. And Rhonda is only representative of those teammates, but she's an incredible teammate, running our clinic with dedication, commitment, authentic dedication, genuine commitment. For a lot of years, I hired her. That's how long she's been here. And when you have leadership like Rhonda in the clinic, and then you can organize those people to work together on things, then big things can happen. And I think the biggest growth for me when I stepped down as program director in 2004 and started working on the quality committee was developing the clinic people as healthcare providers. You're not an appointment secretary, you're a healthcare provider. You're not a lab tech, you're a healthcare provider. And it's since I've helped to unlock some of that potential out there, I think we've improved job satisfaction. I think we've improved the way we care for our patients, the way we understand our patients. And it's been a great, great trip for me, and a great learning experience. And Rhonda, I thank you for everything you've done, and that's why you're one of my heroes. But that's not my only team. So this is a picture that was taken last year at our 2013 reunion. Sherry Price, as you know, many of you probably don't know Jean Hilmer, and most of you probably know Paula Reeves. One of the things, a couple of things here is, first of all, is these women all have different talents. And it's hard sometimes when people have unique talents for them to work together. Ian McWhinney used to say, communicate and get along to his team. Communicate and get along. And Sherry, as you know, does amazing things with the computer and scheduling and things that are really, really hard. Tanya, understands rules and follows the rules. Paula is an amazing person about putting people's talents together and helping people to work together, and lots of other things. She's way, way, way smarter than I realized. I want to point out that Jean Hilmer was hired by Ruth Sammons, who was the first administrator of the program. When I started this program in 1987, I drove to town and I called up my program director from Columbia, Missouri, and I said, what am I going to do? I just took the job as a family practice program director. He said, the first thing you need to do is hang up this phone and call Ruth Sammons. And I said, Ruth Sammons, is she in Springfield? He says, yes, she's in Springfield.
Ruth Sammons was a program coordinator when I was in residency, when I was chief resident, and she just made this program, to be honest. She put it together. She did all of the great things that I couldn't do. She understood business. She was just amazing. She hired this woman as her secretary. That's Jean Hilmer. Jean Hilmer then moved up to be residency coordinator or residency administrator when Ruth retired. And Jean hired a woman by the name of Vicki Greenwood to be her secretary. And some of you have heard of Vicki Greenwood, who then moved up to be the residency administrator when Jean retired. And Vicki Greenwood hired Sherry Price to be her secretary. And although we've twisted Sherry's arm, she's never going to take that residency administrator position. Thank goodness we have Tanya in here. But what I want to point out about teamwork, it's really challenging because we have such different personalities. But when we can align ourselves in the same goals, it's a wonderful thing. And I have to say about these people, they're not just my coworkers, they're my friends. I'm going to miss the people I interact with most, and that's, at least these two, I don't see Jean much anymore. A couple more points. Multidisciplinary, it's a good time to say the pharmacy people are here, but nurse practitioners are here. And to really be good in family medicine, we just need a lot of input working together. And we've got that here. We've got an obstetrician coming, we've got nurse practitioners, we've got pharmacy people, nurses. We've got tremendous talent here, and it's all important, and it's all a vital part of what made us better. Dorothy's one of my heroes because she was just a nurse practitioner who took over logician, and she understood logician. She tamed the monster logician. We started getting data out of it thanks to Dorothy's hard work. She was also a great nurse practitioner. I found one of the things that she loved is old people, and she was terrific at taking care of people. And you know, I think maybe at some level, all of us as family doctors love taking care of people in need. Dorothy loved old people. She takes care of them, and that's what she's doing predominantly now. But she's just representative of why we need multidisciplinary talent. Optimism. Be optimistic. I'll start with Tim. He's an optimist. He's also extremely talented. He's a scholar. He learns things about leadership that I'll never learn. And thank goodness for him teaching me. But also we communicate. He learns from me. And the program is in good hands. But it's not all. Kyle Griffin represents, again, a couple things. One of the things is he's a consummate teacher. But the other thing he did is he was willing to become broader. Remember, comprehensive part of family medicine? I mean, we're going to take care of people. We're going to take care of all people, be they male or female, be they young or old, be they in the hospital or in the ER, in the clinic. And Kyle recognized that we could take a higher level of evidence-based medicine into the hospital, and he sort of became our coordinator of hospital services, and that's a way of becoming broader in our scope and real important. Logan did the same thing in obstetrics. He's the first family doctor of C-section privileges in Springfield, something I worked for 27 years. He pulled it off, partly because of his gentle personality, but he also he represents another area of diversity, and that's osteopathy. Now, I have to admit to you another mistake. I didn't understand osteopathy. I underestimated osteopathy when I was a medical student. I just thought they were inferior, weren't they? Well, I found out and realized that not only were they not inferior, they brought things that we never learned. And by the way, going back to Paul Frame, you may or may not remember, Paul Frame was the one that taught me how to do osteopathic manipulation for sacroiliac subluxation in pregnancy, and it was a great learning experience, and partly turned my attitudes around. But thank goodness for the quality of osteopathic physicians we have here. Thank goodness for the diversity and looking how you improve health. And thank you, Logan, for representing that part of my growth. Last but not least, my philosophy experience, just work for joy. So many doctors get hung up working for dollars, and I've worked for joy, and I've benefited from it. This is a picture of us before we moved over here. Tim's in this picture. I think he's the only one besides me. This is who we were. This is the whole team. This is the clinic staff, the administrators, all the residents, and all the faculty. Now, there's probably somebody missing, but there's not many missing. That's who we were when we moved from the tower over there to this facility over here. And what a great thing that I've seen in my life is to find this many people who are dedicated to helping people get healthier, particularly people who have had trouble getting healthy. And it comes year after year after year after year. And it makes me think that there's something right with the world. But there's one more picture. And that is a picture of patients at Healthier Together. Many of you who've been to Healthier Together know we do some kind of exercise every time at Healthier Together. Thanks to Jacqueline and Kristen, that will continue. We are now managing Healthier Together. The point here, though, isn't the Healthier Together, it's the patients. I wrote a blog last fall about direct primary care and said something about bosses. And Tim commented on my blog that shouldn't our bosses be our patients? What would healthcare look like if the patients were our bosses? That's what I've learned. Those are some of my heroes. Those are some of my experiences. Those are some of my inspirations. It's been a great run. I'm very proud of the program we have. I have great optimism that it will go on and continue to get better. And although we don't all agree or all think alike or all have the same philosophies or age or gender or anything else, we can work together. And when we can work together, there's nothing but good hope for the people in North Springfield in the future. Thank you. All right, back to work.
I just about picked